Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 6 of the Just an Excuse podcast, where the name is the game and the game is TTRP, and it's all the characters in between. I'm your host and the one with perpetual need for the excuse, and any excuse really, to engage in what anyone would consider a considerable level of insanity. My name is Miguel Bloomberg, and welcome back to my table. I'm glad to have you. With me today is a new friend of mine that I've only recently met, but then had the absolute privilege to play alongside in a campaign that will be familiar to you. I look forward to having the DM of said campaign on very soon. But you have heard of this campaign setting before. If you are up to date with your JAE watching experience, that would have been episode 3, Vidala, the Reluctant Matron. That character is a character in the campaign and in the setting that we are going to be talking about again today. Only this time we're talking about another PC in this party, a PC that has certainly struck an incredibly unique chord in terms of party composition, but at the same time comes in with such heart and such really, really fascinating angles that I cannot wait to see come to fruition, and is, of course, played brilliantly by, like I've said, my new friend, Abby, who is with me today. Abby, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me. You are way too kind with the words of praise. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate it. And I mean, hey, that's why we're here. We're here to give some praise and talk about some stories that maybe don't reach the table. I mean, like I've said, that's the name of the game here, right? We sit down every week and we dedicate hours at a time to this thing that we do. And I think calling it a hobby is the right word for it. I mean, frankly, if you dedicated 4 hours a week to a thing, and if anyone else on the planet would call it a hobby, if you dedicated 4 hours a week, every week, to fixing a car, cars were your hobby. But since we do it for D&D, we don't get to call it a hobby, but I really think it should be, and I think a lot of the really great stories that come from D&D don't just come out at the table, they come out in the stuff that you don't get to see, the stuff that comes before that 4-hour session every weekend, the stuff that comes from the ideas of the character and maybe some of the minutia that we don't always get to see because not everyone sees behind the curtain of each individual character. And I'm excited to go into that today with a character, like I've mentioned, has been incredibly endearing in the campaign thus far, and I cannot wait to dive deeper into the minutia of what makes this character tick. I'm very excited. I think you're in for a banger episode today, and this episode, of course, is going to be about the one and only Aster. Please enjoy the following audio show. Seamus stood at the edge of the wheat field, axe in hand, staring at the impossible. He had been sound asleep 5 minutes ago. Another bumper year had earned him another night of jubilant drink. Unfortunately, the one thing it didn't earn him was a happy wife. No matter how well the crops did, no matter how many parties came or years passed, the love of his life was always worried about something, and worry meant work. So when Seamus was violently shaken awake, he was halfway into his overalls before he even heard what she was saying. If he had been listening, he might not have been so surprised. The pillar of light towered into the heavens, its golden glow shifting and shimmering like sunlight trapped in water. The wheat around it swayed, not with the wind, but as if bowing to some unseen force. The ground beneath his boots hummed faintly, a deep thrumming that rattled his bones in a way no earthly thing ever had. And yet, for all its strangeness, he wasn't afraid. Not exactly. He'd heard of miracles before. Signs and omens, folk tales whispered in taverns, old stories his granny used to tell about God stepping down to walk among men. None of those stories ever mentioned this. But if the heavens saw fit to crack open in the middle of his own wheat field, it seemed only polite to go and say hello. Seamus took a cautious step forward. The warmth intensified. Not unbearable, but like stepping into the heart of summer itself. The stalks parted easily as he walked, the air growing thick and golden, the sound of crackling energy filling his ears. Then, the light flared impossibly bright, forcing Seamus to shield his eyes. Heat surged around him, and for a split second, he thought maybe he should have been afraid. Maybe he'd just gotten too close to something a man wasn't meant to see. And then, the heat vanished. The glow disappeared. The air was still, save for the distant chirp of waking birds. Blinking away the after-image, Seamus lowered his arm. In the center of a now scorched crop circle, lying face first in the dirt, was a boy. Well, an elf, if the pointy ears were any indication. Seamus's mind struggled to catch up. He'd been expecting... he wasn't sure. An angel? A god? A great booming voice declaring the end of days? Instead, he got a scrawny elf in a singed cloak, poking at the dirt like it held the answers to life itself.
Seamus cleared his throat. The elf froze mid-examination, then turned his head, locking eyes with the bewildered farmer. For a long, awkward moment, neither moved. Then, in a flurry of panicked movement, the elf scrambled to his feet, nearly tripping over his own boots as he grabbed a wooden staff from the ground. He straightened his cloak, and straightened himself, puffing out his chest with the dignity of someone who definitely hadn't just fallen out of the sky. With a great theatrical effort, he planted his staff into the dirt, chin held high, then spoke.
You there, citizen. Where have I landed?
My wheat field.
Ah, yes, I've gathered that much. I meant... what realm is this?
Rayhill.
Rayhill. Seamus nodded. The elf considered this for a moment, as if rolling the name around in his head like it might suddenly reveal its cosmic importance. Then he nodded sagely, as if satisfied with his own conclusion. Ah, yes, of course, Rayhill. I see. Oh, where is the nearest town? Seamus, still holding his axe, lifted a hand and pointed westward. The elf beamed, reaching into the pouch at his belt. Ah, good, very good. He pressed 5 gold coins into Seamus's calloused palm. Apologies for the field. Consider this reparations. Then, without another word, he turned sharply on his heel and strode into the wheat. Seamus watched him go, the stalks swallowing him up almost immediately. He scratched his head.
He's gonna get lost.
He considered calling after him, maybe offering to point him towards the actual road, but then he glanced down at the gold in his hand. 5 whole gold pieces. Seamus let out a low whistle, then gave one last glance at the giant sigil now blazed into his half-burned field.
Well, ain't no way Isabella's gonna believe this.
And with that, he turned back towards the house, mentally preparing for the argument he was sure to lose.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Literally the best intro for Aster you could have thought of.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to see into the future to see it. I do enjoy making those, and I hope this one lived up to expectations. But, fun times out of the way, let's get to the nitty-gritty, shall we? Starting off, base level question. I ask it, and I phrase it the same way every time. Abby, what inspired this character? Now, like I've said in every podcast before this, and you're probably gonna, I take you to be somewhat of a listener, so you may have heard these words before, but I'll say them again. Inspiration for me comes from many different places. It comes from music, comes from, tropes slammed together in some heinous amalgamation of ideas and thought. But
I get a lot of ideas from a lot of different places, and they kind of translate and manifest in an interesting, meta-narrative of how a character went from a seedling idea to a actual playable thing. So I'm always curious to know, what was the inspiration for Aster?
I have heard it before. It's, I think, just a wonderful question that every character would be able to answer. I think much like you, a lot of my inspiration can come from a bunch of different places, though usually when I start with a character, my biggest question, at least when it's a long-form campaign, is what is the journey I want them to go on? That not necessarily that's the journey they're gonna have, but that's the one I'm initially starting out with. Kind of like, I think most people who are concerned with like self-improvement have like, that's where I want to be tomorrow or a year from now or 5 years from now. That there's this question of like, where does the character want to be? So for me, that question for Aster was, what does it look like when you kind of have this path in life that's laid out for you that you could easily follow and you just don't want it? That it's not, for whatever reason, is not what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've asked other people, like, what part of yourself is in the character. I often pull those questions from, like, what am I dealing with right now? Because, as we always say, at least some of my friends would say, D&D is therapeutic. It is not therapy. Go to therapy, people. But it can be very therapeutic.
It's
and
cheaper.
So it's a lot. Well, depends how many books you buy. How many minis are we doing?
True.
But that D&D can be a very therapeutic tool to answer your own questions about life and things. And so recently I found myself on a path in life that I was like, I could totally do this, but I'm not sure it's what I want. And how do you get out of that? What do you focus on? And from there, I kind of build out the character of like, okay, what is the destiny he has? What is the path he doesn't like about it? What is something he would do to change that?
Right, so really just sort of, maybe not I know in like the typical hero's journey sense, there's a refusal of the call, but it seems a little bit more complicated than that, right? There's maybe he still has a call to adventure in his own his own narrative, but it seems like there is a path for him rather than a path he's discovered, a path that he is being forced towards, and that maybe is a path he doesn't want to pursue for one reason or another, if I'm hearing it right.
Yes.
And you kind of mentioned it already. The follow-up question for that would have been, how much of yourself do you see in this character? And it seems like you've mentioned it briefly, that you yourself felt in a place where you had to make a choice between diverging paths, and this is a way to maybe, play through that in a fictional sense.
Yeah, I always love D&D for like the possibilities and the truly, you can be anything and say anything, but that there is structure to it, that there is this narrative journey you're going on. And so being able to explore the ideas of like, how do I feel about this path in life? How do I feel about this option as a person is really cool, but you can almost disconnect yourself from it. That this isn't, I'm not making this decision, Aster is. And don't be the jerk at the table that's like, my character would do it, and that's why I killed your character.
Yep.
Don't be the jerk. Exactly. But you can definitely do the whole, like, what does my character feel about this? Because there are definitely qualities that Aster has that I don't. And I think it's really fun to play with, like, how does this type of person deal with that? He's, I think, at times a bit more naive. I think he's a lot more pompous. I think he's way more trusting than I am. And that's been a fun thing to kind of figure out throughout the game. So much of it is like what I see myself as the core question of him, but that doesn't necessarily build on everything else about him.
So, you're really kind of hitting it on the head with me. You caught me in the middle of a question here, because now I want to go back and talk about this.
Please.
Because you're talking about how the sort of therapeutic angle, and I think the biggest thing people, because I myself was a little bit of a therapy doubter, if that makes sense, when it came to D&D or TTRPGs in general. I was just very much, I picked a character and it's not me. I'm trying to be something other than me, and wish fulfillment fantasy, especially in the beginning. And I didn't realize it at the time, but especially when I tried to DM for the first time, I realized that when I made NPCs, for example, the easiest way for me to make NPCs was to go, what is some very minor character trait seed that I have? Okay, there's arrogance, there's this, there's that, right? Just pick and choosing. And what if I blow that up into an entire character? And that would become an NPC. And through doing that, I kind of realized, well, wait a minute, and I sort of retroactively started looking at characters I had made previously for other one-shot campaigns, what have you. And I realized, oh, wait, that's a little bit of me, and that's a little bit of me in there too. And I never really noticed or acknowledged that, and it's really cool to look back on, because it's not just, people will hear that it's therapeutic and they think that it's just like, one and done, I do this and I overcome this. But I think like what you mentioned, the fact that you're not being yourself, you're playing someone else, I think that level of objectivity to a situation is actually what helps in the long run something be so therapeutic to you, because rather than being mired in rather than stewing in your own juices, to parrot a phrase.
What a comparison.
Yeah, like a lot of times the reason we get stuck in our own ways is because we're stuck in ourselves, right? So it's very difficult to sort of see a way out when you're drowning. But in these games we get to play characters who we see from a bird's eye view, and that gives us a very objective way of looking at things and addressing problems that we maybe emotionally don't get a chance to. So I very much agree, and more just a bit of an inside look at myself. I used to be a bit of a doubter, but I'm very much on the train of this is where this can be. This is where this can take you, and this is how it can be helpful in the long run. So I 100% agree with you on that. I think we should have done this one first, but I'll add it in now. 30-second elevator pitch on Aster, the character. What is it? What do they look like? What do they do? Just give the audience a little bit of a visual on Aster.
To give a full picture to the audience, I will banana, since that's our spoiler incoming.
That's a spoiler word. Okay.
Spoiler word. It's a very minor one for those sitting at the table, because some of the experienced players may have already picked up on it. So Aster is a elven sorcerer, and he comes from a place that is raised by wizards. Like, they're all wizards, and he is, in fact, the only sorcerer around. I know, a little cliche for the special sorcerer, but it creates this really cool cognitive dissonance in what do you do when the environment you're in is so not made for you. So he is from this very wealthy family on these very wealthy cities, and he's kind of looking at everything and is like, this doesn't make sense, this is wrong. There are things that he has done as a sorcerer, accidentally releasing his magic, or even getting access to things that he's like, normal kids and people don't do this and get away with it. Normal people don't have access to these things. Mm-hmm. I can see my benefits from society, even as like, some 7-year-old equivalent, whatever the aging is for elves. That as he grows up, he sees this kind of injustice in the system and how like it's so favored toward him, and he doesn't like it. And so now in the campaign, he has like begged his family to leave, and he's like, I want to go see the world. I want to go other places. I want to experience other ways of living, other walks of life. And so right now I get this really fun cognitive dissonance of he's raised in this place that values knowledge and understanding overall. And so he's a well-learned man, but is incredibly naive to the ways of the world.
Kind of the intelligence versus wisdom debate almost.
Yes. And he's not a very good student, so his intelligence isn't even that great. Because Int is like a 13 or something. Mm-hmm. But his like desire almost makes up for it, that like he wants to hear everyone's story. And it's just so fun to play a character that's so out of touch. Like, we haven't gotten to it yet really in the campaign, but he doesn't know how to handle money. He has never had to. He has money, but is like, it was never a concern for him. So the idea of like saving or how much things are supposed to cost, he has no idea.
We've just been so horribly poor.
Yeah. This is my pitch. Jared, please give us money.
Please. Thank you. Stop
and
killing.
a level up.
Stop killing parents. Give more money. Thank you. Okay. Good. Interesting. Cool to see the blonde-haired, blue-eyed sorcerer come down from on high to touch grass for the
Exactly.
first time. Okay. That's good. I'm glad to have a visual on the character. Another question that you kind of teased already in just the idea of what inspired the character. You said that you had a goal, or that you had an idea of like a general arc, maybe. I may be mishearing you or maybe misrepresenting it, exactly what you said, but you kind of mentioned having an idea with how that was going to go. Could you maybe give a little bit more in depth on that? Like, for example, with Adia, who's a character I play in another campaign. When I built her, I had a very good idea of like, I know I built her with problems, right? I built her with, here are some problems, X, Y, and Z. By the time she reaches the finish line, however long that may be, however winding a road that may be, I want her to have fixed these issues, hopefully. And then obviously the journey is what matters the most, but at least having a kind of guiding principle of where the character's issues will eventually lead them, if it be satisfying, was really helpful for me in playing characters. And I do the same thing with One and other characters I play. So I'm curious, did you have those goals in mind? Did you have an arc in mind? And are those helpful with you when it comes to playing the character? Do they help you in character creation? Does this have an impact at all?
I think you're hearing me beautifully, that I do kind of have this vague idea of an arc. I try and have some direction, but I don't want to pick like, oh, this has to happen and that has to happen and that has to happen, because then I should just write a book and not play D&D. That
True.
The arc I kind of want him to have is overcoming these naivetes and biases that are put on him by the system, both for him to learn more about the world. I think that's just a desire for the character, that he wants to know more of how everyone else lives. He literally doesn't know anything else. Everything he knows is from a book. And that he wants to take all of that knowledge and go back to his home with a way to help it. That, like, in a way, he feels kind of powerless. I think if he had to describe his home, it'd be like a gilded cage. It's this very nice, lavish lifestyle, but he can't. There are rules that he has to follow. There are societal things he's supposed to do. And obviously just breaking those doesn't fix the system.
Right.
That you kind of have to find a new way of doing things and then exert your influence subtly. If we want to avoid a revolution, then you can do things slowly and over time and with influence. And I think he wants to try and do something like that, but he doesn't know how yet or what other options there are in life. I think his biggest personal flaw is his naivete. And I think in some ways he knows he is naive about the world, but there are also parts of it he doesn't know that he has wrong. That, like, I'm gonna say it now, small banana moment, but he's a little racist.
Okay.
I think it can be, depending on the table you're at, a fun idea because I want him to be wrong and not be correct in this idea.
Yeah.
But that he has just been raised in this like elves are superior environment. That we haven't touched on it much, but like if he talks to other races, other people, he'll be like, well, why don't you want to be an elf? Or like, why don't you like elven culture? Like, isn't it the better one? And I want him to be shot down and kind of have his eyes open to the possibilities of diversity and what it means and how everyone brings something to the table.
Yeah.
So this kind of, you know what you don't know, and then you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, 100%. I think that you're touching on a thing I agree with very much, which is that allowing a character to be wrong is it's a weird thing to describe to people who are like playing the game for the first time, because most people walk into tabletop games or D&D specifically. Usually the first character they make is it's a wish fulfillment fantasy. They're the coolest, most badass character. But as you play more and more of it, you find that, at least I find, that the interesting bits come from characters being imperfect. It's one of the reasons I said previously that, I give characters problems that need to be fixed, and characters being wrong and being confronted with that is one of the most compelling parts of the game to me. Like, I'm a roleplay junkie. That's the shit I live for. And
Best part.
yeah, 100%. And so I applaud you for building a character not only with a goal in mind, but giving them very, like, natural or diegetically set problems that make sense, right? Their problem is not just they are gonna kill everybody. It's like every murder hobo ever, but their problem is much more character driven. All right, like they have this issue and it affects their worldview, but you've also built it in a way where it can be reasonably solved, right? And I think that's also a really interesting way that shows a level of consideration in character creation. So hands off to that. I also think it's interesting that there's obviously arcs. There's, I guess, what you could call mental arcs, right? Where you think your character thinks this way, that arc will resolve when he learns to not think that way, right? That kind of thing can take place, in theory, almost anywhere. But you've also built a character who has a prepackaged reason to go somewhere else, to a different setting, right? Like you mentioned, eventually going back home. And that's something as a DM that I appreciate. And I mean, to be fair, I've DM'd very few times, so I'm probably maybe not the best source here. But for me, the few times I've DM'd, we invest this time into building these amazing worlds and the lore, and unfortunately, just due to the nature of a campaign, most of the time there is a natural lockout to how much of that world can be explored. Simply because, exploring an entire continent with compelling narratives, you'd be playing that game forever. And plus, it's like, you don't want to railroad them, so naturally there are some places that you will go and you won't go. But I love the idea that there can be characters who have a prepackaged excuse to diegetically move the plot forward into a different space. Because I think new spaces and new areas are always really interesting. I think it's rewarding as a player to experience new things that way. But also it gives the DM excuses to, pull us in different directions. And I always think D&D is really firing on all cylinders when there are multiple pulls at once and decisions have to be made. So I think that's really cool. I don't know if you've ever DM'd, if your experience is any different.
I have DM'd. Shout out to my group currently running. We will have session soon, I promise. You won't get a level up. But I'm currently running Dragon Heist, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, some pretty basic stuff. I completely agree that, like, when I'm DMing that, I'm still really new to DMing, and so I've kept them, like, in the city. And I just keep building that more and more and more to make it more and more interesting. So I'm like, look at this really cool thing. Please don't leave the city gates. There's nothing out there.
Yeah.
Like, it almost feels like a video game that there's like an invisible wall.
Yeah.
That I truly applaud people who can make whole worlds and continents that, like, I'm going crazy trying to keep track of a city that's semi-prepackaged in a module. But I do really applaud our current group we have so many people from different places, but not just from different places, like in TJ's episode with Vidala, that she comes from a totally different, like, way of life.
Yeah, different
She's come from the
culture.
same place as Aster, but yes, different culture entirely. And I've truly adored having the two of them play off of each other. That, like, for Aster, Vidala is actually actively uncomfortable to him. She represents exactly what he feels the system is injustice toward. And he's like, in some way, I want to help her, but I also don't want to impose and assume that I know how to help her and that I am the best option, because clearly I'm not. I'm trying to figure that out.
It's a very, like, affronting element to be, like, standing next to.
Yes, and, like, how do I both apologize for the system I'm part of, but also I can't because I'm just one person that's severely benefiting from it. Like, how do you reconcile that? But at the end of the day, they're also just two people in life-threatening situations. And so, like, Aster is friends with Vidala. I think that's a pretty cut and dry thing, regardless of their larger context. But you also can't take the context out.
Yeah, 100%. That's also something I find really cool about this campaign thus far, and I've mentioned it in other episodes. naturally, and again, this isn't a knock towards any other campaign or any other characters or any other players, but naturally, just by the way of the way that the narrative kind of shapes it, and the fact that it's 5 to 7 completely different people making characters and having their own unique narratives, some bonds kind of wind up stronger between characters than others. But in this campaign, I find that, like, every time I look across the proverbial table, I can see a really interesting narrative connection to, like, every other player at the table. Like, I don't know if Aster feels the same way, but at least for me, and I'm playing Uniwan, and I may make an episode on him someday.
Totally should.
Uniwan feels like he has a really cool connection with Aster. He feels like he has a really cool connection with Vidala, really cool connection with Dolver. Like, it feels like, normally as a player, I often go, okay, well, I have to roleplay in this moment. Where narratively do I roleplay? What makes narrative sense for me to roleplay to? And more often than not, it kind of dumbs down to, like, a couple choices. But in this campaign, I'm like, dude, I have to connect with anybody and have really interesting interactions regardless. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I'm really thrilled with how much there feels like an equal weighting of character depth worth exploring to everyone on the table.
I completely agree. I actually, when Jared, our DM, was making this game, I was talking to him and he was listing the people that were going to play, and I had the pleasure of playing with all of them except for you.
Yeah, I was the risk.
Exactly. But I was like, I don't know, both Sen and
guy?
Jared, they vouched for him, so I'll let it go. But they
vouched for
honestly,
me? That's sweet.
Of course they did. God, you're amazing. But this is just us patting each other on the back.
He's got a couple problems, but he's okay. He can do a funny voice. We'll let him hang around for a little bit and just see if he has.
No, I think they mentioned, like, phenomenal player, great RPer, good at combat, but it's just some side notes.
Yeah, you guys are lucky to have me.
Obviously. I think everyone truly has come both with, like, a fully fleshed out character, that there's no one I feel like is two-dimensional or only has one bit or one gag. I feel like they're all complete people, but that they have left room to be altered and changed by those around them. Like, real people, when you show up to, like, I don't know, college for the first time or, like, a new job, you are a person. You have had experiences. You have your views on life, your values, but that doesn't mean the new environment you're in doesn't change who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think RP can go, like, a step up when everyone's able to change themselves. Like, I have loved Uniwan, as you mentioned in previous episodes, and Aster's dynamic, because Uniwan is this robot that woke up that is obviously completely naive to the world.
Mm-hmm.
But that Aster is in some ways very similar, that they don't know how these things work. They don't understand the rest of the world. They don't understand anything but where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
And in other ways, we've had lots of little gags and stuff of Uniwan not knowing words. And I'm like, well, Aster definitely knows this word, even sometimes if Abby doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, TJ last time saying verisimilitude, I had to Google that in the middle of the episode.
I had to Google it too.
I was like, what is he talking about?
He got all the fancy words.
He really does. Better playing Aster than I would. But like, Aster would know this and can kind of feel like the smart guy in the room. And another banana, but because he comes from a place of wizards, these heavy scholars, you guys have pointed out that he talks very poshly, which maybe we'll see later if he comes on the podcast, don't know. But he tries to use a lot of big words, and it's almost kind of a front that at home he is the idiot, and so is trying to use as many big words as possible to impress all the wizards around him, and now it's kind of stuck. What was that?
So, he uses big words he maybe doesn't understand, so he sounds more photosynthesis, right?
Exactly. That I think everyone at the table adds both these deep stuff to their characters, of their backstories and who they are, but also these little nuggets of surface level stuff that you can really easily play off of. Just hats off to our own table.
Yeah, I think the table is really, really talented. And I think, like, what you're hitting on is really perfect, is that every single character is really well built in the sense that they have... I'm going to kind of use an analogy here. They have edges. if that makes sense, right? Like normally people try and when you're first building a character, especially when you're building that wish fulfillment character, you kind of build that perfect square. It's got those nice smooth edges and those rounded corners, and it's all smooth and pretty. But very often when you build characters with that kind of mindset, you wind up with a very kind of slippery thing that doesn't really connect and maybe sort of slides off the world and could fit in anywhere just as well as it could fit here. But I appreciate that at this table we have a lot of very, speak for myself, this is like the fourth character I've ever built in a long-term campaign. But it speaks to the experience of the people who have built characters in this campaign. And it shows that they've built characters that have very rough edges because they understand that those edges are what allows other people to hang on, if that makes sense, right? You can climb on those. You can find rough edges to kind of dig in a little bit harder, or that connect you a little bit better, and and we're all just kind of jostling for position until, like puzzle pieces, we fit in. A square puzzle piece is cool until you realize it fits nowhere. And so I think it's really cool that we have, 5-6 people at a table who have all come to the table with very, very interesting puzzle pieces of characters that we're all just so excited every session to see how they will all fit together. So I think it's really cool that it came out that way.
Yeah, honestly, I love that analogy, that kind of the more you can flesh out a character and make little tidbits, the more real they feel. It adds to the verisimilitude of the story.
Because that's human, right? Who among us is so smooth?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do think a lot of people, like even myself in my first few characters, I made like this Dragonborn barbarian.
First character was just a Dragonborn monk. Let's go.
Dragonborn, best one.
Let's go.
But that I made him like so angry like all the time that I was like, this doesn't feel like a real guy. This doesn't seem like a real person. And it makes it so hard to roleplay, to find something to attach to and connect with. And even I think it makes the character, because they realize their own flaws, their own abilities, and own limitations, that they then want to reach out. Like if you don't know how to do something at any point, you go find a YouTube video or you ask a friend.
Yeah.
And it's those moments of reaching out is when you can make relationships and connections to things. And if you don't add any of those at a table, then there's no way for other players to kind of be like, oh, well my character's good at talking, or my character's good at pushing stuff and can help you with that. You have the cute little RP moments of building relationships.
No, yeah, 100% agree. So, I mean, it's one of the reasons we come back every week, because we're just like, there's always something to latch on to. There's always something exciting coming up. And, I can't wait to do it again in 2 days.
So excited.
I am. Moving forward to a little bit more of the lighter questions, just to sort of keep us moving here. How did you get the name Aster? I know me personally, I am a habitual hitting random on the random fantasy name generator until I find something I like. Offender.
That is bold.
Honestly, the only character I've ever actually not like randomed an idea name for was One. Every other character I've ever made was just, yes, it's an excellent joke, but
great joke.
But every other character I've ever made has just sort of been randoming until at least I see something that kind of sparks an idea, or randoming until I just latch onto something I like. And that's had different results, but it's kind of like naming a dog. That first time you name a dog, it's kind of like, it's got that kind of weird, chunky taste to it. But then by like the second or third year, that's just the dog's name. You couldn't imagine it being any different. So where did Aster come from?
It's a good question. I totally agree with the dog comment that I've named characters and be like, I don't think this fits. And then, 2 sessions in, you're like, that's their name. Can't change it now.
Couldn't have been anybody else.
I'm a perpetual Pinterest user. I'm very sad at the sharp rise in AI, but I try and find people's art, and I usually try and do that from like rough sketches, or if there's an artist's name that I can then look up. So Aster's character art has a name in the corner that actually is his name. I added to it a bit, but the artist, because I want to make sure to shout out, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but Sarenhale, Sarenhale. They have like a Tumblr that I was able to find. Some really cool art, so shout out to them. This is not sponsored in any way, but I just thought their character art was really cool. I was like, oh my gosh, that's Aster, and then in the corner it has kind of his full name, which might come up later, but one of them is Aster. So I guess Small Banana. His middle name is actually Aster. He doesn't go by his first name while on the campaign.
Interesting.
And I really liked it because the first name feels very like wizardy poshness. And then Aster, I was like, I could meet an Aster. Like, me as Abby in the real world could meet someone named Aster. And so it felt more, quite literally, down to earth.
So you thought it was more down to earth. So let me back up. So making sure I'm understanding the narrative here. You really like to look at art, and I agree. Art is a really good inspiration for characters.
Totally.
And honestly, this will be a side tangent in a minute, but I want to finish the thought.
Please.
So you saw art for a character that you liked, and just in looking at the picture, you found a couple names underneath that picture. Like I'm imagining a human being who you accredited. It said, "Hey, here's art of a character. His name is this," and you said, "Hey, I like that character. I like that name. I'm gonna run with it." Is that what I'm hearing, or I just want to make sure I understand?
Yes, that's it. That this character, I have no idea if it's an OC or it's from something. I've never seen the character before, but I saw the character art and was like, wow, that's like exactly what I wanted. And then there's a name for it in the corner. I was very fortunate with this character and didn't have to, sit on it for 2 days. That you actually heard it in the campaign. The first name is Zante, and the second name on it is Aster. And I had built on his name from there. That I was like, oh, Zante is very cool and kind of, it feels so like not a thing you'd hear normally. That here's this very unique name.
Stand out, like it leaves an impression kind of name.
Exactly. Versus I figured like when he left, he'd want to go by something else. He wants to try and be a different guy. And so why not just use a name he's already familiar with and be Aster?
All right. Okay, cool. Interesting. I've never actually seen a name be picked up from art. Like I said, I'm usually hitting random on the name generator, and like Vidala, TJ saw a fruit, so that he liked.
Inspiration from anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Inspiration from anywhere. I mean, I always have the kind of the Ratatouille approach to knowledge and inspiration. Not everything is inspiration, but you never know where it might come from. And talking about kind of just a tiny side tangent, I really like using art as inspiration because I often find that like when, it's one of the reasons I like making characters in Hero Forge, if I can help it, because sometimes those limitations will actually inform character decisions. I don't know if you've ever felt that way, but I've made characters before where I've had a rough idea for a backstory, but in the art I'm using, they have an empty sword loop. And I go, that could be about something interesting. And then suddenly the backstory actually sort of caters to that. Or there might be an imperfection with the way Hero Forge makes their characters having to render in their style. And I go, maybe it's actually that's part of the character, and I find characters actually kind of become informed by limitations. And I always find that interesting. I don't know if that even has anything close to your experience, but just a fun bit that I've found exciting.
Oh, definitely. So like the character art that I have, I adore finding character art that I'm like, oh, I need like an orc fighter. But then I had a previous character that the art I found, I was like, oh, that's so him, had this big scar like under his lip, and I was like, oh, where'd that come from? Or for Aster, the character art
There's
has a
some
tattoo.
backstory in there.
Exactly. Aster has like this tattoo in the art, and, like this big sleeve. Then it's kind of these amorphous shapes, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I think it's cool he'd have a tattoo. But I'm like, that's just not a tattoo. That feels too basic. But I was like, what if it's magical and he could like move it around his body if he wanted? And like, I think it'd be exciting if we ever got in like an anti-magic field that it would just like disappear for a bit. That it makes this kind of fun thing. Or the pendant he's wearing, I made the design part of his backstory that I love. Just a fun way to flesh out the character more of these little details the art gives you. Thank you, artists. You guys are amazing.
Yeah, thank you, artists. You guys kick ass. Another question here. Have you? I guess I think for a lot of people, or not a lot of people. I think just in in my opinion, rather, let me be specific. In my opinion, I think the campaign is still relatively fresh in the long term. You know, like we have certainly been cooking a little bit. Like we've started to really bake in some good themes, some character ties. We're definitely not fresh, but I would say in the grand sense we're still pretty early on. So this question might not work as well as if you were talking about a character you've played for 80 sessions versus I think the 10, 15 we've done so far. But would you say you've learned anything about Aster that you didn't know before playing him? Like the example I've used in the past is, Adia, it's a character playing a different campaign. I like to make flow charts generally of just what a character will do, because these games are like the ultimate litmus test for or a stress test for character, because you'll inevitably wind up in a situation you weren't expecting, and you have to kind of guess what you think makes sense for the character, and there's 100 different factors why something would or wouldn't make sense for them. And so there might be a general flow chart you have, or at least that I have for a character, but then every once in a while you'll get a new scenario that you'll have to adapt to, and you'll learn something really interesting when you have to make those diverging branches. Like for me, Adia was this walking vagabond in horrible clothing, and when we got to town the first time we got money in our pockets, she was like, oh, what is she gonna do with this money? And I thought about it. I was like, oh, she's gonna spend it because she's an ex-noble and she's fancy and she wants it, and oh my god, she needs all the best clothes. And suddenly this thing about her and dresses and high-class fashion became such an integral part to the character that not only do I still do it, but I look back and I go, how did I not even imagine that? Because it fits her so perfectly. Do you have a moment where you made a diverging path for Aster on your flowchart and you were like, wow, that's so perfect for him? Or do you think that that moment hasn't really happened yet? What would you say you've learned about the character that you didn't know before you started?
Yeah, so thankfully, unfair to my predecessors, I have listened to the podcast because it's great and have had a lot of time. This is probably the question I thought about the most, especially when listening to other people, that I was like, oh, what have I learned about Aster? I do think the biggest thing is yet to come, whatever it may be, that we just haven't stress tested enough. But the two currently that I've kind of been like, oh, yeah, that is a thing, is one, his relationship with money, that he is like one of those stupid rich people that you meet. Just way too, there's too much money to fathom how much old money he comes from.
It doesn't even compute to him what money realistically is.
I honestly don't think his family ever had him handle money, and we had a session, one of our first sessions, where we had to pay for a lunch. And I was like, oh, Aster has, his family sent him with money, he's gonna pay for lunch for everybody. Because he's like, oh, the number they're asking for and the number I have, one of these is bigger than the other, so I can pay for lunch. The concept of saving is not a thing to him. And I talked with Jared after that. I was like, how did he handle money? What does that look like? And Jared was like, honestly, everyone probably knew him and was like, put it on your family's tab. There was no physical exchange of cash. And so his relationship to money, I always thought was really interesting, and I can't wait to explore it more and waste so much money and make my life as a player harder.
Well, it also makes the interaction he had with Unione very funny, because I'm pretty sure it was either you or Vidala that talked to him about money, and that's why he now has a coin hanging around his neck. He's like, what the fuck do I do with this? And he goes, oh, you keep it. And he goes, oh, okay. And he kept one. I'm pretty sure that was either you or Vidala, so that makes that's really funny.
I think it was Vidala, but I loved being Aster in that moment and being like, yes, do we have to keep money? Why?
What, you don't have enough of it around here?
Yeah, in his head, he's like, I don't, I get, it's one of those things you have to do, but you're not quite sure why. That, you have to change your air filter in your house, and there's a very good reason for that, but I'm not sure I could describe to someone the exact problems that would happen if you don't change your air filter, besides, a fire hazard. Or, how that would work. That there are some things in life you, know to do, but don't know why. And the other thing for Aster was his hobbies, because he's this very, sheltered child. Imagine, I don't know, the royal family in England.
Yeah.
of like you only get to hang out with certain people, you only get to talk to certain people, you only have certain teachers, you can't go to normal classes, you can't go normal places.
It's quite a bubble.
Exactly. That I was like, what does this kid do?
Mm.
And I'm like, he doesn't really like reading. I've already made him kind of a crappy student. Sorry for bad words.
I said shit in like the show twice. You're fine.
But fair, I'll curse more, sorry. But I was like, what the fuck does this kid do? And I was like, I think he honestly likes plants. That he doesn't seem very sporty or athletic, and he doesn't want to read. So I was like, I think he'd just like nature. And it ended up fitting really well with like being an adventurer. That I was like, camping isn't always everyone's cup of tea. It's certainly not mine as a person. But I'm like, I think he would honestly enjoy like sitting in nature and like going on these long, I'm gonna say hikes, but obviously you're like traveling for days. That he would find some pleasure in that, and you almost have to live that lifestyle. That I was like, wow, this like fits so perfectly that he would simply enjoy the low stakes, freeing feeling of being in healthy nature.
Yeah. Even if he doesn't know how to camp. And he's like, we have to
Exactly.
lay on the ground. There's the kind of that oh fuck, there's a word for it, but like there's that disconnect between the two. That's really
Yes,
cool.
we had that, such a crass moment, but I think it was one of the other players, Lake, who is from this very hardy town, playing a character named Jojo, was like, yeah, you just go like shit in a hole in the ground over there.
Go dig yourself
And like
a hole,
that
man.
that did not work with Aster, who I don't think has ever shit like on the ground or like pissed on the ground. He's like, that sounds wrong somehow.
There's no way that's how the commoners do it.
Exactly. He's like, that's and it's that disconnect of, he's like, that's obviously how you have to do it, but you just never thought of it like that. Here you have these grand adventurers going these big quests he's excited to be part of, and then you have to like shit in a hole.
You know, it kind of strikes me now that, you know, we've talked about Aster being a very, you know, at least in comparison to like a non-city personnel, Aster's a very learned individual. I imagine he read a lot of books, especially as someone who's after adventures. I imagine he probably read stories, a lot of stories. And so it's
definitely
really interesting now that we're talking about it, is that I imagine when he went on this adventure, that he was like, I'm gonna go on these great adventures, I'm gonna see these things, I'm gonna be like the heroes in the stories. But he gets to experience the part that maybe people don't write about, which is the ugly part of it, which is the, you know, shitting in the woods in a hole, right? Where he's like, this wasn't in the books. The heroes of legend didn't have to do this. So it's cool to see that. I didn't consider that before, but it makes total sense. It's cool to see that narrative play out.
I wish you could see my face. I'm smiling so much. Thank you for picking up on little breadcrumbs of my character. That's literally it. And I wanted him to have that disconnect of like, oh, when the hero goes to fight the dragon to save the princess, but there isn't always this like clear-cut right answer, especially in venturing, especially in D&D, especially in the campaign that we're doing, that, you know, what if the dragon is a family? What if the princess doesn't want to be saved? What if what you thought isn't always this clear-cut path? And I think to some degree he was drawn to that, of like, oh, I'll go out, I'll become an adventurer, I'll know exactly the right thing to do, and then I'll do it. And like, that's not how life works.
No, not at all. Man, this is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of shit that doesn't necessarily come up in RP, but it's like, I'm talking about that kind of that meta-narrative layer of like, this thing that's going on behind the scenes that's only playing out behind our own personal screens. This is why I love doing this, because you get to learn about that stuff. It's really cool. Man, that's awesome. Okay. Taking a slight step back to a little bit more campaign general. Okay. Granted, I like I've said before, we are a little fresh, not new, but fresh. Which is really ironic considering what's actually happening in the campaigns. Poor choice of words. If you had to say what this campaign is about so far, like if, you know, bonus points if you could summarize the campaign in like a sentence, 4 words or less if you're really feeling crazy, what would you say the campaign's about? Would you say there are certain, like, are there certain narratives thus far that have stuck out to you more than others, or do you just sort of get a vibe of the world thus far that you think has stuck with you? Like I said, if you can do it in 4 words or less, hats off to you.
So again, I must admit my advantages here. One, I am very good friends with our DM Jared, and so I have talked with him extensively about this campaign. We'll just hang out and talk about it, and he'll bounce ideas for stuff that has now been like totally thrown out or that he's keeping in. So I get a bit more information as to the world at large. And then 2, I have again watched the show, and so it was like, oh my gosh, let me think and think and think for like 2 days about this, and I think I've got it in 4 words.
Okay, I'm on my toes, man.
I don't know. So I think that what I'd say is sins we bear together.
Ooh, sins we bear together.
That,
Go on.
as kind of an elevator pitch, in the campaign right now, we are in a country that is abundant with food, but there's some dark magic, I'm going to say, happening that is causing like the food itself and the plants themselves to revolt against the people, both turning the people into monsters, causing monstrosities to appear. We've fought like a fae that was like, oh, this is our land and you guys took it. And so somehow it's kind of vaguely tied to this sin of gluttony, of like greed and taking more than your share and more than you needed. And we've talked a bit with like
and kind of like a
nobles.
kickback to that.
Yes,
like a response of the world almost.
That there's this almost what is the word for it? Comeuppance or judgment day happening.
I was gonna say verisimilitude just to be a dick.
Always verisimilitude.
Anyway.
That the world itself is like punishing you, and how do you as a society deal with that?
Yeah. That's good. That's real good.
Again, I've had like 4 days to think of that, so.
No, hey, those days paid off. I think it's true. I really think
Thank you.
that there is an element of punishment, I think, to the setting as a whole. Like, obviously, we're in a setting that is literally in the throes of being subjected to some level of retribution by forces unknown. And we're kind of in the midst of that, but it's far from just a physical threat. There's also, as we've experienced, through our time just getting to the city, there is a desire of what is assaulting the realm at the moment that goes beyond just like tearing everything down. It goes into more of like, we don't want to just tear down the physical, we want to tear down like straight to the root of you. Like that is the level of retribution this thing seeks. And I think it's a happy accident of the way the characters have kind of played out. And again, I'm kind of guessing based on assumed understanding of backstory of other characters, but I think everyone except for JoJo, and it may just be because I don't know a lot about JoJo, everyone except for JoJo thus far seems like they have a really narratively interesting reason why they should be punished, in quotation marks, even if that punishment isn't fair. Right? Like, you could see the narrative angle of Vidala being punished for leaving the regatta. And you could see the narrative angle of, Aster trying to fight against a system he's benefited from. There's a reason for Uniwan to be punished for, whatever he's done in the past and what sins he bears. And Dolver, I know he's like the war vet character. I know there's shit he feels guilty for and maybe needs to be punished for. And it's ironic that of all those characters who have really easy reasons for they should be punished for something, JoJo is the one who has so far suffered the most, like in the moment, in material. And maybe there's something we don't know about JoJo yet, but it's really interesting that almost everyone that I know so far, almost everyone has this like narrative reason to be punished, and the one who probably deserved it the least got punished the most. I don't know if Jared did that on purpose, but if it is on purpose, that's narratively sickly sweet. Very nice.
truly love that expansion of it. I originally meant that as like the world, but I love it in like our character specifically.
Mm.
Is so good that you're so right. Each of us seems to have this there's a sin that we have on our conscience. Like I love Dolver, as you mentioned, who's kind of our cleric war vet, and then we have another character, Shayam.
Oh
who
yeah,
is-
Shayam, and Shayam is a part of like what most of the continent thinks are the bad guys.
Exactly. That Shayam is played by a character named Fen, who you have had,
I love Fen.
or a player named Fen, who's has been on the show, and Shayam is this like barbarian orc, kind of stereotypical, but has this much deeper look at things. And Shayam and Aster connected a lot on like being in a system, but also seeing issues with it. That Shayam as the character sees issues in the tribal system and what it is, but that the two of them currently sit on opposite sides of a civil war happening in another country.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love the two of them, whenever that other country comes up, that there's this like tension in the room as the two of them know that the other one doesn't agree with them or doesn't agree with what's happening or does agree with what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's such a fun who's right. Like one of you has to be right.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you reconcile that as someone you're also very close friends with?
Yeah. Yeah. But I like that. Sins we bear together. I wonder if that will be a tagline that will also betray the solution, which is that, we've all sinned, but maybe we stick together and make it a little easier on ourselves. I like that. Those days were worth it, Abby.
Thank you. I really thought about that one. I didn't get some of the other questions that I'm sure you'll ask in a minute.
Mm-hmm. Well, then let's hit these last two at least. First will be a quickie. We'll say favorite NPC.
Okay, so there has actually not been too many NPCs in my opinion.
True, actually. A lot of the adventure has been pretty solo. I think we've encountered the majority of NPCs thus far in the new city we're in.
Yes, and to speak to that, I think my favorite one has been the queen of this. She's the queen of the country, but it's obviously at the capital city that we are right now. And I love her so much because obviously we were kind of in the country and we're like, wow, all these problems, these plant things are happening. Like the queen must just be asleep at the wheel. She's such a bad leader. And then we got to like the capital in the throne room talking to the queen. And I just felt like the whole party shift. And I truly give this a credit to Jared. The whole party shifted and was like, wow, she is doing everything she can with very limited resources, with nobles that are fighting her at every turn, with limited information, with no one coming to help her. Like, wow, she is actually incredibly good at her job that any of this has stayed together.
Yeah, it was a really interesting subversion of what we expected.
Yeah, that I don't think it ever occurred to any of us that she was actually doing her best.
Mm-hmm. We probably would have thrown her in with the nobles had we had it our way.
Yes.
All right. So the queen, yeah, I think she's definitely been an interesting character thus far, and definitely one that was much more of a dynamic character than we expected, and I think that has certainly played off well so far. On that note, talking to favorites, favorite campaign moment thus far. And if you think that you've had good moments, but your favorite moment has yet to come, I'll let you pick that. But if you instead just want to pick from so far, if you had to pick your favorite soon-to-be usurped moment, what would you say?
I definitely think there are always more favorite moments to come. This is actually the question I could not think of an answer for. There are so many fun little moments, especially between characters, but I think one of my favorites so far, certainly, has been, there was a point we were fighting some bad guys and it finished and there was kind of this morally gray question hanging in the air, and Uniwan, your character, just kind of ran off. And so Aster and Jojo, who, to give a small bit of pitch, since we've mentioned her like 8 times, Jojo is like our bright-eyed, bushy-tailed fighter adventurer.
Love her to death.
She's definitely probably the youngest officially in the party. She's a halfling.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, please don't kill me.
I know she's not a dwarf.
Yes. No.
Yeah, so
Halfling or gnome is what I'm about to say. I'm pretty sure halfling.
I know that the character's short and it's not a dwarf, so it has to be, by deduction, a halfling.
Exactly. I do like this game, I swear. I'm paying attention. But Jojo and Aster go off to find Uniwan. That we're like, oh my gosh, we need to go find our party member. And you did such a beautiful job kind of explaining a panic attack, but for a robot.
Mm.
And what that looks like, and I think both the way you handled it in explaining how he looked, what it felt like, the vibe of everything. And then also, at some point, you had the wherewithal to just be like, hey, he's basically having a panic attack. And I think it's good sometimes. Obviously, you want to try and stay in character in the game as much as possible. But ultimately, this is a game for us to play. Yeah. And sometimes it's better to just remind everyone of the rules or to break that kind of veil that sits and just be like, hey, this is what's happening or this is what's going on, to move things along.
Yeah.
And I feel like you handled that so perfectly. And then Lake, to his abilities as a player, was able to then think of on the spot a lullaby that this country would have sung.
The lullaby, yes.
Exactly.
We're still waiting for that to drop on Spotify, by the way. Lake,
exactly.
Get to it.
To the credit, Lake is an actual, he makes music and he's very good at it.
Shit, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Sorry to drop some lore about you, Lake, but yes, he makes music. And so when I had said when Aster said could you sing a lullaby, I fully left it open that Lake could have then been like, oh, JoJo sings a lullaby. But I also love that he took it and was like, give me 10 minutes, and he made a lullaby for this made up country.
Yeah, he whipped that thing up fast.
Exactly. But I just think it was a beautiful moment between the three characters, and just such a highlight of you two as amazing RPers.
Yeah, that was a really good moment. Uniwan is just he's such a frustrating character to play sometimes because this isn't the Uniwan episode, so I won't talk about him for very long. I'll just say he's such a unique and yet challenging character to play because you have to find ways around default things, if that makes sense, right? The things that should be easy and then build into the hard stuff later are suddenly really hard. It's like you turned the Venn diagram over and suddenly the easy shit's hard. Because you can't describe things normally. And so you have to describe things as someone who doesn't understand them. And so in the moment, like you mentioned in this moment, I was really glad I got a chance to describe it in character and how it would sound and how it felt. I feel like it came out well. But then also just as a personal pet peeve of me as a player, and we'll get into this a little bit later after the next section of questions, I am very much aware of the time constraint of this game. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but I constantly have this really aware ticking clock of how long we have to play this game every weekend. And there are times when I'm like, yeah, we could RP all day and really suss this out in reality, but at the end of the day, it's better if we maybe just every once in a while we pull our mask off and go, here's what's happening, and then pull the mask back on to save maybe 20 minutes so that we can continue to get more out of the game every weekend. And that is something that I, even without Uniwan, bring to feel that affects the way I play the game, because I'm like, guys, we are running on limited time here. I want to get to these great moments, but I don't want to waste time. I want to make sure we get these moments and have more moments, because then I got to wait 7 days to get them again. So
literally, and
I don't know if you feel the same.
I completely agree. Yeah, that there is a time constraint. I think you handle it probably better than I do, because I completely forget that I'm like, oh yeah, I have to go eat dinner and go to sleep and now go to my job and pretend we didn't just lose a party member or whatever.
That's why I eat before session, guys. I walk to every session I go to with at least a bowl of soup.
You're smarter than me. You do such a good job of again taking that. There's moments that you can just take the mask off, explicitly say things and put it back on, and good players, good RPers will be able to run with that. And I think it's such a good skill. And to your point about Uniwan, I think that we can feel bad about ourselves sometimes for using stereotypes that we're oh, this is such a cliched character. Oh, the sorcerer's the chosen one. The robot wakes up and doesn't remember anything, and he's just trying to be a good person. But there's a reason stereotypes exist, and it's not necessarily bad if you're a new player to lean on them. I leaned on them a lot for my first few characters. Absolutely. That it's about taking it in your own direction and making it more than just the stereotype, more than just the angry barbarian that I made my first character, that then evolving it to be well, what are their personality traits? Who are they? Add things to it, and that'll help a lot. The Uniwan, yes, is this like, if you ever played Overwatch, he's Bastion of waking up in this forest and not knowing anything and having this dark past.
Very, very Bastion coded.
Yes, but that he also feels different. For one, he can talk. And that he tries to learn new words and he tries to help people, but is also, I think, quicker to understand the like grayness and nuance of life.
Yeah. Right. And I same to. I think you're hitting on a point, which is that cliches. If you use cliches for the sake of cliche, like if you just go, this story has to have this type of character, just because that's what everyone else is doing, that's when cliches can run aground of the sort of like being frustrating or annoying, because there's no innovation. You're doing that because it's standard, and stories shouldn't be standard if you can help it. But when you use a stereotype to kind of as the foundation of a character, so that people can, every sword should be smelted differently, but every sword should still have a handle that you can hold on to. And I think cliches should act like the familiar grip. You immediately know when you see a weapon where to put your hands. And I think cliches are like that familiar grip to grab a hold of. But then once you get a hold of it, then the weight and the way the sword actually handles and the camber of the blade and so on, those are what should then really separate from being cliche, being something that is cliche for cliché's sake, then into something that is actually using cliche as a foundation for something greater. And I think everyone in this campaign, again, can probably fit into some stereotype, some cliche. PTSD veteran, somewhat detached merchant, golden child of a aloof civilization, country bumpkin. Like, there's all these cliches playing at once, but it's, of course, as usual, it is the minutia, it's the camber, it's the rough edges that are what really makes the difference here. And again, I think it's just a testament to the players we have at the table, that so many people are able to use these cliches to our advantage. I mean, especially Aster. Aster has so many really interesting tropes running at once that they all kind of blend together in this really interesting way, where there is the sort of typical aloof arrogance that kind of comes with it, but there's a lot of soul to it. Like, you're not telling people they're dog shit off the rib, but you do kind of carry that little bit. There is a little bit of pride there. You take pride in that you might know something better than somebody else. And I think there's a lot of different ways I could talk about it, but I think it all plays very well. So kudos to you and to everybody at the table.
Thank you. I think just a final note on this. I think it's also really fun when you try and combine cliches. And I know, like, there's the stereotypical, like, oh, they're barbarian, but they're, a tiny kobold. And, like, that's funny, but I think even to go further, to have, like, the damsel in distress, but also the, like, loud drunkard, and how the hell do you mix those together to make something cohesive and a complete person? And, then you maybe just get, like, Fiona from Shrek, but it's still a really cool way to take these two kind of known ideas and how do you intertwine them as an easy starting point for, like, I want to make an original character, but am not a professional writer.
Yeah, true. Okay, well, we certainly had we dove into some good stuff there for a minute. But unfortunately, Abby, I have to cut you off for a minute here.
What?
I have to make a very important call for our favorite section of the show called Character Telephone. Abby, I'm going to put you on hold for a second.
No!
Hello there. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking with? Is this Aster?
Are you from Teva? Yes, it's Aster.
Oh, good. I would worry there was several names you're going by. I'm glad this is the right one. Okay, I had some questions for you. Would you be available to answer a few?
I I suppose we have some downtime at the moment.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, and where are my manners? My name is Miguel Bloomberg. I'm with the Just an Excuse podcast, and I'm very excited to get to talk to you. Are you well?
I am alive and currently unharmed. Is that going to change?
No, I don't think so. You might feel the urge to do that to other people when we're done, but that won't be my fault. Okay. Aster, some fun questions. What's the worst first impression you've ever made?
On someone else?
Yes. You can't make first impressions with yourself, can you?
I suppose you have to meet yourself again. I think it was a priest I had the displeasure of meeting in a small town in northern Dolorith. I, to my own folly, had introduced him, and he had recognized my family sigil, and I had questioned his faith. That religion is not particularly valued where I come from, and in doing so, he had seemed rather cross at my comments.
Well, okay then. Be sure not to, make that mistake again, okay? Next question. Say you're caught doing something you shouldn't be. What's your go-to excuse when getting caught? Someone like you, I'm sure you've gotten your hand cut in the cookie jar a couple times.
Proverbially, yes. It's an odd set of questions. I suppose most standardly, if it's something not to do with my family, I simply state who I am, and it tends to go away. Or, if it's something that my mother has caught me in, I usually blame the folly of uncontrolled magic.
Do you have a lot of uncontrolled magic, Aster?
I used to. As a child. The excuse has waned significantly in its robustness in recent years.
We always do lose out on those good excuses later in life. It's a shame we only come up with them when we're young. Say you had only 5 seconds to grab something before running for your life. What do you take? You only get one.
It may sound a bit cliché. I don't need many things, nor have many possessions. I suppose a friend.
A friend? Interesting.
Odd.
No, people appreciate companionship. It's not odd, although I do find it odd that you teleported into an unknown realm for the first time with no one but yourself.
You are an interesting man. I did, and I suppose it was more to find a friend than to leave them.
Well, a shame we haven't found any yet. Anyway, looking forward, what's your biggest guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure?
What do you enjoy, but you wish you didn't enjoy it as much as you do?
Oh, this is probably a rather common answer, but I do enjoy a bit of combat.
A bit of combat? For a refined wizard like yourself.
It's a fun time to truly get to apply the things that are so often simply written. Yes, I do enjoy combat.
I suppose it is a language like any other.
Certainly shouldn't enjoy it. It's a violent exchange.
Well, that leads me to another interesting question I wanted to ask you. I had the pleasure of talking to Vidala not too long ago. Do you know her?
Did? Yes.
She won't remember this conversation, so you won't have to worry about this. Neither will you, to be fair. But when I asked her a very interesting question, I asked her if she had to fight anyone. I know you are currently traveling with a very colorful cast of characters, and I asked her who among that cast she could kick the ass of. She said your name with very little hesitation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well...
She said she could kick your ass.
I I think that depends greatly on the context of the encounter, particularly if I am about 50 paces away and have access to magic and I'm ready for it. I think I could win. Though, compared to the others in the party, she's probably not entirely incorrect. Especially if it's a close quarters thing. I truly think it depends more on the context of the duel happening.
Interesting. Now, what about you? Who do you think you could beat in a fight? Whose ass could you kick?
That is a complex question. I don't think I could beat any of them in a boxing match. But I believe in a game of wit, I may be able to best JoJo. If we were to
Aster
play
thinks he could kick JoJo's ass. Very good.
I didn't say that.
Moving on. And actually, the last question we have for today. You've been very helpful. And I'm afraid this will be one of the more uncomfortable questions to round out our time together, and it has been lovely.
They've all been uncomfortable.
No, they've been hilarious. This one will be uncomfortable. Say you and your companions are all running in the wake of a terrible monster. There's no way for all of you to make it out, but you come to an interesting conclusion. If you trip one of them, the rest of you will live. Who do you trip? Who do you sacrifice? Better one than all five, right?
I do tend to agree with such thoughts. In all honesty, probably shame. In the thoughts that the idea of something trying to eat her, I would pray for its own safety.
So
and I am not a religious man.
So tripping the best equipped, shall we say?
Yes, if one must bear the brunt of the harshness of the world, it might as well be the one most prepared for it.
Very logical answer. Well, Aster, it's been an absolutely lovely time hanging out with you. You won't remember any of this, but I had a wonderful time. Goodbye.
This is
Abby, glad to take you off hold. How are you doing?
What the hell, man? It just went silent for like 20 minutes. I thought you died.
No, it's not that long. Nothing to worry about. Anyway, talking a little bit about you here in the final couple minutes we have on the show today. Talking about you as a player personally. Very, very briefly, and I do mean briefly because there are other questions I want to get to. What would you say would be your experience with D&D, TTRPGs in general? How long you've been playing? How many campaigns? Just what would you say on your D&D? What would you put on your D&D resume?
I think I've been playing, if I had to count it out, 6 years, roughly.
Wow.
I started playing based on a group in college. I played briefly on some stuff, not D&D, but other TTRPGs in high school, and that kind of fell apart. But for much of high school, or college, I played, actually, I found a lot of my friends that we currently play with through that group, and so that's been amazing.
Yeah, this group has certainly evolved. I feel a little similar in that I was in one group and I kind of branched into another with more, and I've branched into yet another with more of this group. And it's always fun to me to hear more lore of this group, because I realize that I've actually just sort of been stumbling into a well-established canon, and I had no idea that that any of you guys knew each other, which is really funny.
Ha!
Going forward, and again, this is a little bit more on the personal side, if not trying to ask you to self-report yourself here. What is your biggest... I know we touched on this before, talking about being very aware of the time that you have every week to play the game. What would you say is your biggest pet peeve as a player? For me, I have very little patience. Like I said, I have that very well-round internal clock of how much time we have, and that leads me to really enjoy playing button push characters, because if we're making plans and we're doing it all in character, that's all fun and good, but eventually that will very often devolve into just 7 people around a table debating how to knock on a door, And, that can be fun, but at a certain point, I just want to knock on the door because we've been talking around in circles for 30 minutes, analysis paralysis and all. So that's certainly one thing that gets to me. I'm curious if you have anything that you find affects the way you play the game.
I think for pet peeve, my biggest one is like main character syndrome. For anyone who's played in D&D, it's a pretty common thing that if there's a player at the table that thinks they're the main person in the story, that D&D, I think, and most TTRPGs are collective storytelling. Everyone's putting their voice on it. Yes, the dungeon master has the most, but that everyone gets to speak.
Yeah.
And
It's a team
I think
game.
this shows itself. Yes. I think it shows itself when, kind of like in soccer, if you don't pass the ball, or football, depending where you are, if you don't pass the ball, that in D&D, if you don't include other people in your RP moment, or you don't share part of your character for them to then share back, it can feel very like, well, why am I here if you're just going to talk to yourself?
Yeah, definitely wouldn't do there. That's like my one excuse for role playing half the time. It's like, I want to do a thing in character. I'll just take somebody with me. Grab them and let's role play together. That's my one justification for half the shit I do. It's like, I want to do this thing, but I don't want to take up time. I'll just take someone with me.
It's a really easy way to like, I want to do something. Who could I possibly bring with me? I know like some stuff it's fun to do by yourself and have a little secretive moment, but I think most things should be some amount of group stuff.
Yeah. 100%. Kind of a little bit in this vein, but maybe a little more concrete. Would you say you have like a strength versus a weakness as a player? Like, as I've said in the past, I'm a huge RP junkie. I love RP. I'd do it every day if I could. But in terms of weaknesses, I'm not a very good mechanical player. I'm not great at combat. I like combat when it's more just a tool to enhance the roleplay. Like, it's never just the roll the number, did I hit or not? It's the I swing in this way and I try and I'm aiming for this thing. Like, in that way where combat is narratively relevant or interesting. I've never been really interested or good at like the whole build crafting of a character to make all this stuff play out interesting. I mean, Una1 is frankly the furthest I've gone in that vein because he's a multi-class. It's the first multi-class I've ever done. And I'm still not very good at playing him. I basically boiled down his mechanic side to, did he have his things turned on or not? Otherwise, he just hits and hits again. But that's certainly something that I'm not great at. But that's just me. Do you feel that you have a strength versus a weakness as a player?
I think in terms of biggest strength and weakness, because you go on all day about minute things, I honestly think it's the same for both. That in a lot of groups that I play in, I am the note taker, not always, but usually. And that can be a good thing. A lot of DMs love a note taker and someone's writing down everything.
God bless the note takers. Seriously.
I know.
I couldn't do it. I'm horrible at notes.
Notes are half the reason I stay engaged, but a lot of times DMs love note takers because they're the ones who like put the pieces together and are like, wow, this means that, and this guy talked to that guy, so that means this is the plot. I suck at that. I'm so bad at it. And in some ways, it's a bad thing because I'll have all the notes and the answer will be staring me in the face. And I'm like, I don't know where we should go, guys. And like every sign points to like the mayor's house. And I'm like,
like, I don't know.
Yeah. It's like, maybe we should go to the creek. I don't know. But conversely, it also means like, while I take all these notes, I've had DMs like reveal something. And I'm like, wow, I never saw that coming. That's so cool. And so this double-edged sword that I'm like, I'm never going to get the mystery you're putting together unless you make it so painfully explicit. But I'm also always going to love the mystery because I'm never going to get it.
Right, exactly. Like, you will, despite having all the answers, you'll still you get that fresh-faced feel of just enjoying it. Cool. Okay. And last question, I think, and then we'll wrap up.
No.
This is the big one. It's one I ask every player I have on here. And I really enjoy it because I get to really talk. It gets to really see what this game means to people. Why do you love D&D, TTRPGs in general? Like, you know, what makes this hobby so amazing to you? What keeps you coming back for more?
Honestly, probably the easiest question you've asked me all night is that you get to put yourself in someone else's life. I love anything that lets me experience the world from a different angle or different perspective, whether that's travel or like video games or like poetry. Anything that lets me see it through someone else's eyes, I think is just so profoundly amazing, because it so highlights how both as people we're never that different, but that everyone can come at something and get a totally different answer. And then you put the extra layer on top of like everyone at the table is also looking through a different lens, and what does that make the final imaginary world look like? And that unlike video game RPGs, this gives you truly infinite possibilities, infinite directions. That you can be like, hey, DM, can we go to the library? And the DM's like, I never thought of going to the library. That would be a totally great place to get information about XYZ thing. Now I gotta think of a library, but that you can do that. There is no like, oh, this city in this game doesn't have a library, so too bad. Sucks to suck. That you can really do anything, and it means you can make characters and things. Like, I've loved making characters that view everything so differently and forcing myself into that thought experiment of what do they think about the situation, and it might be completely opposite to what I want to do or would like to do or would naturally do. And it really gives you that, I think, empathy for the rest of the world, and to see that everyone has their own way of doing stuff. That's in a nutshell. I love that I get to see everything from someone else's life.
Yeah. Well said. Don't think there's anything else I could add to that. That's chef's kiss.
Thank you.
Well, Abby, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It has obviously been an absolute pleasure. I know that I approached you guys with this random idea out of nowhere, and that, you know, it's certainly maybe it wasn't the most attractive idea on its face, and I know that it is a little bit of a you know, a trust thing to really be like, come out on the internet with me and let's just talk for a while. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on with me and taking this chance on this fun little hobby of mine. I've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed being with you, and I hope to do many more. But obviously, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. This is absolutely amazing. I am 10,000% honored to be the first woman you've had on the podcast. You know,
actually,
at least I can be the first to do something. Second.
There's the episode before you that will be coming out soon.
Spoilers. No, I'm
not spoilers by the time this one comes out, but fun.
Yeah, really. But well, I'm still honored to be here. You're an absolutely amazing player, a wonderful new friend of mine, and this has been such a fun way to look at D&D, and especially selfishly our own campaign that we're currently going through. So thank you.
Like I said, this is just an excuse to talk, man. It's just an excuse to yap. But it has certainly been a fun yap, and I thank you so much for coming. And I want to thank you, listeners, for joining me here today at my table. I've had an absolutely wonderful time with you as well, and I hope you've enjoyed. As always, my name is Miguel Bloomberg, and I hope you have a wonderful next session. Woo!